Well, welcome to week 5. Week 5 covers divestitures. It's the biggest topic of the week. There's a few other ancillary topics that go along with it. This is not a topic that I have in my other books very well. I mentioned before, besides the text that we're using, I've taught this class using 2 other textbooks, and I've usually been just pulling PowerPoints from those books. However, neither one of those books that I normally use includes anything about divestitures. So instead of using a PowerPoint, much of a PowerPoint this week is really short. I just culled a few things from here and there to put together. It's mostly terminology based. So the assignment for the week is just a discussion board. However, it's a little bit longer than others. It's got 4 questions, and the 4 questions are more detailed than they typically are. There's kind of questions within the questions type of things going on for this week, so just kind of be mindful of that. And you'll be writing a little bit more than you normally would this week, kind of because you don't have a quiz or any other assignments to work on. It's just the discussion board. So my hint for everybody is to make sure that you look through all the links that I provided in Blackboard. A whole bunch there from Investopedia. I went through Investopedia, spent some time with it, found all the topics there that relate to Chapter 7 for everybody to go and take a look at. So just make sure before you dive too deep into the discussion board that you've read Chapter 7 and you've also looked at all the various links. So open up the links. Each link is about a web page of information to read through. So between your Investopedia links and Chapter 7, that's really your study material for the week. The chapter is about 30 pages, not too bad of a reading. You probably read through it in about an hour, probably read through those links in about an hour, and that'll give you a pretty good solid foundation to be able to answer the questions. Now, one of the questions will deal with an IPO, initial public offering, and so my big hint for everybody is just to Google initial public offering and go and find a couple of initial public offerings, because one of the questions I'm asking you in the discussion board is to go find one. And there's an Investopedia link that explains specifically what IPOs are. They're discussed in Chapter 7, but they're not really defined there very well. We have touched on them previously, but I just want to make sure that you have some information. So one of the Investopedia links is all about IPOs. Okay, and also finally down here, start to think about the final project. There will be a separate recording that will explain to you my expectations, and just make sure that if you haven't already, send me your public company that you would like to do your final project on. Just a few definitions here as you go through and look at the chapter. Corporate control, corporate governance, financial architecture, just a few bigger picture type things just to be aware of, and you'll see some of those things in the chapter. And then also the chapter talks about these topics too. With divestitures, essentially what you're doing is you're selling a portion of your company to somebody else in some way, shape, or form. And so this talks about spin-offs, carve-outs, and privatizations are little topics that are brought up in the chapter. Just be aware of those. And this talks a little bit more about privatization. It's essentially, and this really isn't necessarily covered in the chapter in great detail, just more of an FYI. Basically, the government has an industry that it owns, and instead of running that as a governmentally owned entity, it instead takes that and sells it off to private for-profit businesses. And then when you think of a conglomerate, think a really, really big company. Okay, something with many, many moving parts. And those are the kind of companies that will do divestitures, because they may run all these different industries within the company as separate divisions that could easily be spun off, sold, carved out, whatever the term is. So just be aware of that. So here's just some examples of some large conglomerates that might include divestitures in the future of some sort. And then this just talks about private versus publicly owned companies, and just a few things about each one. Now, most of what we're looking at is publicly owned, but it's possible that a publicly owned company can sell a division to a private company. or sell part of a division to an equity fund of some sort. So that's kind of why I thought it'd be helpful to see kind of both of these columns here and just take a look at those and read through them. So not a lot of extra explaining to me this week about anything. It's really just a matter of reading Chapter 7, looking at the Investopedia links, just digesting that and regurgitating it in the discussion board questions. There's 4 questions this week, so expect a little bit more writing, but maybe that's okay as a change of pace. No quiz to worry about, no other assignment to worry about for this week. Just go ahead and do your discussion board and all will be good. Up and coming is a final project. Up and coming is also a final exam. More details about those up and coming. Thanks.